The icy winds whipped across the frozen plains of Nerion 5, a planet where sunlight barely touched the ground and storms came without warning. The ground was hard, sharp, and glittered with frost that could cut through skin. Few creatures dared to live here, and those that did had learned to hide quickly, to survive. Yet somewhere in the desolate expanse, a tiny figure moved slowly, shivering uncontrollably. Her skin was a pale shade of blue, almost translucent, and each breath she drew came with a small, painful shiver. The girl, no taller than a human child, dragged herself across the ice, her small hands numb and stiff. She had been separated from her colony during a violent storm, and now she was alone. The wind tore at her fragile body, and she could barely lift her head. Her large, round eyes scanned the white nothingness for any sign of safety, any sign of warmth, anything that might save her. But there was nothing. Only an endless frozen landscape that seemed determined to claim her life. Somewhere far above the frozen world, a human named Jack piloted his exploration ship through the thin atmosphere. Jack had come to Nerion 5 not for adventure, not for fame, but for research. He had studied countless harsh worlds, learned their dangers, and prepared himself for them all. But the harsh beauty of this icy planet was unlike anything he had ever seen. Snow and ice stretched endlessly in every direction, reflecting the dim sunlight in a way that made the world seem both magical and deadly. Jack had been scanning the surface for signs of native life when his sensors picked up a faint life signature. A small, fragile reading, barely above the background noise of the planet. Curious and concerned, he descended, carefully navigating the ice ridges and deep crevices. The sensors led him to a small depression, almost invisible beneath a layer of frost. He stepped out onto the ice, his boots crunching softly. That was when he saw her. The girl lay curled up, shivering violently. Her tiny body was blue from the cold, and she seemed barely alive. Jack's heart tightened at the sight. He had seen people injured in hostile environments before, but there was something about her, so small, so helpless, that made him act without thinking. He knelt beside her and carefully lifted her into his arms, feeling the chill of her skin even through his insulated gloves. "Hey, it's okay," he said gently, trying not to frighten her. "You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you." Her eyes opened slightly, showing a pale green color that glimmered with fear and confusion. She tried to speak, but the cold had made her voice barely audible. Jack realized she could not survive long in this condition. He quickly set up his portable heat generator, a small device designed for emergencies. The machine hummed softly as it released gentle warmth. Jack wrapped her in his insulated jacket and held her close, letting his body heat seep into her frozen limbs. Slowly, her shivers began to subside. Her breathing became steadier and color slowly returned to her skin. "Don't be afraid," Jack whispered. "You're going to be okay." The girl's gaze remained fixed on him. She did not speak, but her large eyes seemed to study him, curious and cautious. Jack could feel a spark of intelligence there, something beyond mere instinct. She was not just a child lost in the cold. She was aware, and she understood that he meant no harm. Jack decided to call her Lyra, after a constellation he had admired as a child. "Lyra," he said softly, "I'm Jack. We're going to get through this together." He secured her in a small insulated pod he carried for emergencies and began moving toward a nearby ridge where the ice was more stable. The terrain was treacherous, with sharp crevices and sudden drops that could be fatal. Yet Jack moved carefully, keeping Lyra close and protected. She clutched his arm weakly, seeking warmth, and he could feel her small fingers trembling. As they walked, Jack noticed how adapted she was to her environment despite her fragile appearance. Her eyes seemed to sense subtle changes in the ice, detecting unstable patches before he even saw them. She pointed silently, and Jack altered his steps just in time to avoid a thin sheet of ice that would have given way. Even in her weakened state, she was helping him survive. The sun began to dip below the horizon and the temperature dropped sharply. Jack knew they could not stop moving for long. The cold would claim Lyra if he did. He found a small cave-like formation in the ice, a hollow created by a collapsed ridge, and decided it would be a temporary shelter. Inside, Jack set up a more powerful heating device and carefully placed Lyra on a soft layer of thermal padding. "Rest," he told her. "You need to get your strength back." She nodded slightly, her lips still pale, but she allowed herself to relax. For the first time since the storm, she felt safe. She watched him as he worked, arranging the equipment and preparing rations. Though she could not speak the same language, she understood the intent behind his actions: care, protection, and warmth. Night fell, and the cave glowed softly with the gentle light of the heater. Outside, the wind howled, and ice crystals formed intricate patterns on the cave's entrance. Lyra leaned against Jack, seeking warmth. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. A fragile trust, a connection born not from words, but from the shared struggle to survive. The next morning, the storm returned, fiercer than before. Jack knew they could not stay in the cave. It was unstable, and the snow threatened to collapse the small shelter. He wrapped Lyra securely and began the dangerous trek across the icy plains, guided by his sensors and by the instinctive signs Lyra gave him. Hours passed. Jack's knowledge of survival techniques kept them alive, but he could feel the strain on Lyra. She was small, and every step through the deep snow was a battle. Yet she did not give up. Her determination impressed him. Even in her fragile state, she had a resilience that he admired. Suddenly, a deep rumble echoed through the ice plains. Jack froze, sensing danger. Ahead, a crevasse had opened, wide and deep, blocking their path. Jack scanned the area. There was no safe way around it without risking a fall that could be fatal. "Stay close," he whispered to Lyra. "We're going to get through this." Using a combination of climbing gear and careful calculation, Jack helped Lyra cross step by step. Her small hands gripped his tightly, and he could feel her pulse against his arm. They moved slowly, each step deliberate, each moment tense. Finally, they reached solid ground on the other side. Lyra looked up at him, a mix of relief and gratitude in her eyes. As they continued, the storm began to clear, revealing a faint glimmer of hope, a distant ridge that seemed to rise toward a more sheltered region. Jack knew that beyond that ridge there might be signs of Lyra's colony, or at least safer terrain. He encouraged her, speaking softly, praising her courage. Her small body had endured so much, yet she remained determined. By evening, they reached a plateau overlooking the frozen expanse below. Lyra, exhausted, leaned against Jack, her body warm now, but her energy nearly spent. She looked out at the icy plains, her large green eyes reflecting both fear and wonder. "You're safe," Jack said again. "We'll find your people. I promise." For the first time since the storm, Lyra allowed herself to feel something beyond fear: hope. Her tiny body no longer shook from cold, and her heart no longer felt the crushing weight of despair. In the human's care, she found warmth, safety, and something more: a reason to believe that survival was possible. That night, under the dim light of the distant sun, they huddled together in the shelter Jack had prepared. Lyra rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Outside, the storm raged, but inside there was warmth, there was hope, and there was trust. Two beings from entirely different worlds, united by circumstance and the shared will to survive. Jack knew the journey ahead would be difficult. There were countless dangers still waiting: predatory creatures, unstable ice fields, and the ever-present cold that could claim them in moments. But he also knew one undeniable truth: he would protect this fragile alien girl at all costs. And in return, she had begun to teach him something just as important: the courage and resilience that could exist even in the smallest, most fragile beings. For now they rested side by side, waiting for the sun to rise again. And for Lyra, her tiny body no longer felt the bite of the frozen world. In Jack's care, she had found warmth, hope, and the first flicker of a new beginning. The morning sun barely pierced the icy clouds, casting a pale silver light across the frozen plains of Nerion 5. Jack and Lyra rose together, ready to continue the journey. Lyra's small body, once blue and trembling, was now warm and strong enough to walk, though she leaned on Jack for support. Her eyes sparkled with a cautious determination, as if the hope he had given her had grown roots overnight. Jack scanned the horizon with his binoculars. Beyond the next ridge, the terrain seemed less treacherous, and he hoped to find signs of Lyra's colony. The journey would not be easy, but with each step they were closer to safety. He held her hand firmly, guiding her over the uneven ice and snow. As they moved, Lyra began to show signs of intelligence and awareness, far beyond what Jack had expected. She pointed out thin ice layers, uneven snowdrifts, and dangerous slopes before he even noticed them. It was clear her species had evolved to survive in these harsh climates, despite her fragile appearance. Jack smiled, impressed by her intuition. "Good eye, Lyra," he said. "You're a great guide." She tilted her head at him, unsure if she understood the words, but she continued pointing and signaling, helping him navigate the frozen wasteland. Despite the cold, the exhaustion, and the danger, a bond had formed between them, a mix of trust, reliance, and something deeper that neither could fully name. Hours passed, and the frozen world seemed to stretch endlessly before them. A blizzard began to form in the distance, dark clouds rolling across the horizon like a creeping shadow. Jack knew that if they did not find shelter soon, the storm could trap them, possibly even bury them under snow. "Lyra, we have to hurry," he said. "There's a storm coming." Her small legs moved as fast as she could, but fatigue was beginning to slow her down. Jack lifted her into his arms again, feeling her light weight as a blessing and a responsibility. The wind howled, cutting at their faces, and snow stung their exposed skin. Jack's eyes scanned for anything that could provide temporary refuge, and finally, he spotted a small cave entrance partially hidden under a snowdrift. They stumbled inside. The cave narrow but dry, and Jack set Lyra down carefully. He activated the heat generator, and the cave began to glow with gentle warmth. Lyra shivered slightly, but this time from relief rather than cold. She curled up close to the heat source, feeling safe for the first time in days. Jack allowed himself a moment to breathe. He looked at Lyra and felt a surge of protectiveness. She was small, fragile, and entirely dependent on him for survival, but at the same time she had a quiet strength he could sense in her eyes. It was the strength of someone who had endured unimaginable hardship and refused to give in. The storm raged outside, but inside the cave, Jack and Lyra found a fragile peace. He offered her a small ration of nutrient paste, and though she ate slowly, he could see that her energy was returning. After she finished, she leaned against him, her eyes bright and alert, studying his face with curiosity. "Tomorrow," Jack said softly, "we'll continue. I think I can see your colony from the next ridge." "We're almost there." Lyra nodded, though she did not speak. The idea of seeing her people again gave her a surge of hope, a lightness that she had not felt since the storm had separated her from them. The next day, the blizzard had passed, leaving the world glistening with frost and snow. Jack carried Lyra over treacherous ice patches and guided her through snowdrifts. Soon they reached a high ridge overlooking a valley. Below, Jack's scanners confirmed faint movement and structures, signs of life. Lyra gasped, recognizing the shapes of her colony's buildings and the familiar glow of their survival lights. "Your people are down there," Jack said, his voice full of relief. "We made it." Lyra's eyes welled with tears. She had survived the frozen wasteland, endured the cold that had turned her skin blue, and now she could finally return home. But more than that, she had found something she had not expected: trust in another species, and a sense of hope that had been lost with the storm. Their journey down to the colony was slow and careful. Jack kept her close, ensuring she did not slip or fall. When they finally reached the outskirts, members of Lyra's species appeared, their eyes wide with disbelief. They rushed to her side, checking her over and calling out in their strange, melodic language. Lyra's small arms reached out to them, and tears ran freely down her cheeks. Jack stepped back, letting them take over, but he watched closely. It was clear that the colony had feared she was lost forever. Her survival, thanks to him, had restored hope not just for her, but for her entire community. The alien parents and elders examined her carefully, ensuring she was unharmed, and finally they turned their attention to Jack. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace, showing that he came in friendship. The colony members studied him, suspicious at first, but slowly their expressions softened as they realized he meant no harm. One of the elders, tall and regal with shimmering blue skin, stepped forward. "You saved her," the elder said in halting Galactic Basic, a language Jack had studied. "You brought warmth when all hope was lost," Jack nodded. "I did what anyone would do. I couldn't leave her out there." The elder studied him for a long moment and then smiled. "Then you are welcome here. You have shown the true spirit of your species. Compassion, courage, and selflessness. These are rare qualities." Lyra, now fully recovered, took a step forward and reached for Jack's hand. She did not speak the words he would understand, but her gesture was clear: gratitude, trust, and a bond that went beyond species. Over the following days, Jack stayed with the colony, helping them repair damaged structures and improve their heat systems. He taught them techniques he had learned on other planets, showing them how to protect themselves against blizzards and predators. Lyra stayed close to him, learning from him and assisting where she could. Her small hands proved surprisingly capable, and she quickly became a valuable member of their efforts. As Jack worked alongside the colony, he realized something profound. Humanity's greatest strength was not in technology or weapons, but in compassion. The ability to care for others, to risk oneself for the survival of someone else, was what could change entire worlds. Lyra's survival was proof of that, and it was a lesson he would carry forever. One evening, as the colony settled under the soft glow of their heat lamps, Lyra approached Jack. She touched his arm lightly, looking up at him with her large, expressive eyes. He smiled gently, understanding the silent message. In saving her, he had not only given her warmth and hope, but he had also formed a bond that transcended worlds. The colony celebrated her return with a small ceremony, honoring her survival and the courage it took to endure the frozen wasteland. Jack was invited as a guest, and the elders presented him with a small token of their gratitude, a finely crafted amulet that symbolized protection and trust. Lyra watched as he accepted it humbly, her small hands clasping his in quiet admiration. Days passed, and Jack prepared to leave Nerion 5. His mission had been scientific, but what he had gained was far more meaningful, a deep understanding of the resilience of life, the courage of a tiny alien girl, and the undeniable impact that compassion could have. On the day of his departure, Lyra and the colony gathered to see him off. Lyra hugged him tightly, and for a moment Jack felt the weight of the bond they had formed. He knelt down to meet her eyes, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Remember," he said softly, "you survived because you never gave up. Keep that hope alive." Lyra's green eyes glimmered with understanding, and though she did not speak, her small nod said everything he needed to hear. She had warmth now, hope, and the knowledge that someone from another world had believed in her. As Jack boarded his ship and lifted off from the frozen plains, he looked down at the colony below. Lyra waved, small but strong, and he knew that humanity's light had left a lasting mark on Nerion 5. It was not through weapons or conquest, but through courage, selflessness, and the simple act of giving warmth and hope to one small life in need. High above the ice world, Jack felt a quiet pride. In a galaxy full of dangers, of cold worlds and fierce creatures, the human spirit could shine. He had seen it in the tiny alien girl, in her eyes that now held trust and hope, and he knew that this bond, fragile and unlikely though it was, had changed both of their lives forever. As Nerion 5 receded into the distance, Jack made a promise to himself. No matter how far humanity traveled across the stars, no matter what dangers they faced, they would always carry the power to change lives, not through force, but through compassion, bravery, and warmth. And somewhere in a colony far below, a tiny alien girl with bright green eyes would always remember the human who gave her hope when she needed it most.